If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 59, with Anjie and RJ from Rich by Intention. Today is March 1st, 2022.
A lot of times we think that millionaires look like the people that are driving the luxury cars, that have the luxury items, have the name brand Gucci or the designer brands. So once we were able to wrap our heads around what most millionaires actually look like, we were like, wait, that could be us. We were probably living in the midst of millionaires, like in our neighborhoods that we just didn't know about. I think that was eye-opening for us. And we were like, hey, let's try to be those millionaires next door.
Hello, world. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I am a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This podcast is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Before we get into today's episode, please take a couple minutes to go into Apple Podcasts if you're listening from an Apple device, to rate and review the podcast. If you appreciate the free resources that are provided in this podcast, then the best way to let me know is to do just that. Reviews help the podcast be more visible, and it helps other dreamers discover the podcast. So thank you. I appreciate you. And now let's get back to today's episode. Hello, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth. And I'm so glad that you've decided to tune in for today's episode of the podcast with Anjie and RJ from Rich by Intention. Anjie and RJ are a millennial couple who founded Rich by Intention to empower couples to manage their money in everyday life with intention by eliminating debt, saving money, and investing for the future. After paying off $123,000 of student loan debt in about a year, they're now on a path to financial freedom. Anjie and RJ are hosts of the award-nominated Rich by Intention podcast, where they share the stories of powerful and ambitious people and couples to inspire listeners to take action to build the life they desire. Today, we talk about Anjie and RJ's story of paying off $123,000 in debt in 15 months. They share their tips on how to do it. Since paying off that amount of debt, Anjie and RJ have started their own platform called Rich by Intention, and they've been featured on Good Morning America, Black Enterprise, Business Insider. And today we talk about what living a rich life by intention is and how you can get started doing just that. So here is Anjie and RJ from Rich by Intention. Anjie and RJ, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yes, thank you for having us on.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
This is Anjie and I'm RJ, and we're the founders of Rich by Intention. Our goal with our whole platform is to get people intentional with their monies. Specifically, we focus on couples to help them win with money.
Yeah, and we're also hosts of an award-nominated podcast called Rich by Intention, where we really try to inspire our listeners to just take action to live life on their terms.
So what motivated you guys to start this platform, Rich by Intention?
Yeah, so we decided to start Rich by Intention back when we actually paid off $123,000 of student loan debt in 1 year. RJ and I, as a couple, really, we got proactive pretty early on in our relationship to just learn about personal finance, how to build wealth, and all of the tools that we learned over the last decade really enabled us to pay off our student loans pretty quickly. And so we just wanted to create a platform where we can share our money lessons learned, where we can really give tips and inspire people to really take control of their financial health.
Yeah, during our journey of paying off the debt, we pretty much were low key. We were doing it, right? Really focused on just getting the debt paid off and really intentional. After we paid it off, it was really important for us to share our story. A lot of times we kind of live our life as like the millionaire next door, low key, really behind the scenes type of work. But what we realize is when you share your story with others, it motivates them to do the same thing that you did. And we really wanted to inspire others to follow the path that we did in their own way.
Yeah. And I think especially people that look like us, being young, millennials, Black, oftentimes money is a taboo topic for a lot of people, especially where we come from. And we wanted to share our story to help people see that wealth can come from people who look like us.
123,000 in that short amount of time, that's no small feat. And I remember reading the story in Business Insider. I think you guys have been featured in Good Morning America since then. And when did you pay it off?
So we paid it off in the spring of 2018. We actually started paying off our debt. We came back from our honeymoon back in 2017. We got married and we decided like, hey, we don't want to start our newlywed life, our marriage off with all of this debt. They say that finances or money fights are a huge challenge for couples and the leading cause of divorce in marriages. And so we were like, hey, we don't want this to be an anchor in our relationship, in our marriage. And so let's really create a plan to tackle this. So that was literally when we came back from our honeymoon in 2017, we decided to create a plan to pay this off. And initially, when we actually created our plan, when we mapped it out, it was going to take us closer to 4 years. It was going to take us over 3 years to pay off our student loan debt. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And I think during the journey, as Anjie mentioned, we thought it was going to be a long haul and intention was the key word. I think when you laser focus on a goal, things start to happen. And if we never started, it never would have happened, period. So we're glad that we took action and we reaped those benefits.
That's quite an interesting topic to tackle on a honeymoon.
Yeah. Well, we are very goal-oriented people.
And just in general, one thing that we had when we were dating, we had money conversations all the time, regardless if it was how much student loans I had or if we were reading a book like Never Eat Alone or Rich Dad, Poor Dad or Millionaire Next Door. We were having like these conversations. So it was normal for us during our honeymoon just to have conversation.
Yeah. And I think when you get married, you're kind of in this point where you're like envisioning your life together. And so a part of that vision for our lives included our financial lives. Where do we want to be financially, not only for us, but for our family? Now we have a daughter, and it's really about putting ourselves in the best position so that we can do our best for her and give her our best. So it was normal for us to have those conversations about money early in our marriage.
I'm curious to hear, though, how was the debt split off? Was it like more person that had more debt than the other? The reason why I'm asking this is because a lot of times when people have debt, they're afraid to even have the conversation with their partner. And it ends up sometimes in just hiding that from the partner and then having to find out later, which causes even more tension. So I'm curious to hear about your story and if you have any tips on how to have those type of conversations.
Yeah, so I was the culprit with the majority of the loans. I had about $90,000 and Anjie had the remainder, about $30,000-ish.
Close to 40.
And for me personally, I wore my student loans on my sleeve. Some people wear their heart. I use my student loans. So I brought it up all the time, kind of just hold myself accountable because I was ashamed of it. I was defeated by it at one point, especially once I got out of school and was looking for a job. So when I would have conversations with me, I'd be like, I hate Sally Mae or I hate one of these loan providers and talk about it. So that was me bringing it up in the beginning, but it definitely was uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah. And I think given that RJ brought this up early on, on in our relationship while we were dating. I think as the person on the receiving end of hearing this, right? Like hearing that, oh, well, I'm in close to $90,000 of debt. At the time, we weren't making that much money. We were new grads. So it's like, whoa, this is huge. But I think to your point about how do you open up that conversation, I think to the person on the receiving end, you have to create a safe space for your partner to be vulnerable and open, being able to share this kind of information with you. And I think that's the beauty of being in a relationship where you can have this person to be a sounding board. You can have this person to share your vulnerabilities with. And I think we have to be conscious of just creating that safe space, that non-judgment zone for our partners. And so I tried to do that with him. I was like, whoa, not to say I wasn't like, oh, wait, that is a lie. But the thing about RJ was he brought it up because he wanted to take action on it. He wanted to get a plan around his student loan debt that's close to $90,000. And he's like, these are the things I have to do. And when you see someone who wants to take the initiative and wants to create a plan to really take action on it and not just sitting and saying, woe is me, you're able to have more constructive conversations about it. And I think that's where our financial journey really started almost a decade ago, just trying to figure out how do we tackle this together.
So it seems that for the person who has debt, it's basically to at least start coming up with a plan. So by the time you approach your partner, they know that this is something that's a priority to you, as opposed to, hey, this much amount of debt, it is what it is.
Exactly. Yeah. Having a plan, knowing your numbers. I mean, you can't really do anything until you know where you are. So for me, that looked like going to all my different loan providers, finding the number, finding the interest rate, and just clearly knowing how much in debt I had. Rip the Band-Aid off. It hurts when you go through this process, but it's like, okay, I know where I'm at. And from there, it was horrible. It was horrible, like just knowing the numbers, but it motivated me to at least start doing some steps towards paying down the debt. And at that time, it was just paying on time and tracking it and having conversations with it. But small steps leads to big results over time.
Yeah. And from there, like I said, that's what motivated us to really start getting educated about our finances and figuring out, okay, how do we create a budget? How do we change our mindset about money? And so that's what we did together. That's the work that we did together. So there wasn't anything that I read or listened to that RJ didn't listen to or read, and vice versa. We shared information back and forth with each other about the things that we were learning.
So what are some of the resources, I guess, that helped you during that process of paying off that much amount of debt in such a short amount of time?
So we both were working in the city at the time, and we had long commutes, a couple hours a day. So we both got Audible and started listening to money books while we were commuting, essentially at the same time. So it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was Millionaire Next Door. From a career standpoint, networking standpoint, it was Never Eat Alone,
Think and
Grow Rich. So we started listening to those. Every month we had like a new book that we kind of were listening to. And that helped us get on the page, talk about different points. We listened to some podcasts as well. And that started the whole journey for us.
So let's talk about that 15-month period. How much of your income was going towards paying off debt?
All of it.
Yeah, most literally we were probably living on, I don't know.
Yeah, it was all of it. And everything outside of our expenses and small amounts just to save, we put everything towards our debt because we really wanted to tackle it and just get it out of our marriage so we can focus on growing our family and building wealth.
So how did you do it in 15 months? Do you have a plan of action that you can share with the listeners?
Yeah. So the first thing that we did was after we got educated about money and shifted our mindset that, hey, this is possible. Paying off this amount of debt is possible. And also building wealth is possible for us. We weren't really used to that idea. But after we did that, we budgeted. We decided to have money date nights, as we like to call them, and where we talked about our finances, how much was actually going to our student loans this month, how much we were allocating to our expenses. We really got into the details, the nitty gritty of where our money was going. And I think that's the most important step. Understanding where your money is going and then you telling where your money needs to go is one of the most powerful tools that you can do on your financial journey.
Yeah. And as we had our money date nights, anything that came from that, we would put it on our fridge. Hey, this is what we were paying down. This is the goal that we have. And so it was always visible in terms of that goal that we had. Next thing that we did, we lowered our expenses. So we negotiated our rent, really talked to our landlord, paid on time, signed a 2-year lease, brought down our rent payments, negotiated our cell phone bills, negotiated anything and everything we possibly did, from our car insurance, figured out how can we lower that, took defensive driving to lower it as well. We sold some of our furniture because now that we were living together, she had furniture, I had furniture, and we just sold a couple things to save money in that instance as well.
Yeah. And I think just touching on the negotiation piece, that's really powerful, because one thing or a motto that we like to live by is that the worst you can hear is no. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't hurt in asking. Our landlord, we didn't know what he was going to say. We were like, let's just ask if he can't go up on the rent this year. And so what do we need to do to make sure that happens? Well, one, we were really good tenants. We paid on time. We kept up our place really well. And again, where we were living was not the best. It was good for the season we were in, but it was a small apartment and wasn't the prettiest, but it was good for the season we were in as newlyweds and trying to get our financial lives together. But the negotiation, I think, is key. And I don't think a lot of people think that it's possible to negotiate certain bills, but it totally is. And just ask. And you're not always going to hear yes, but the more you ask, you might get that yes. And so that's what happened with us, calling up our cell phone company, calling up our insurance company just to see what they would say if we were able to lower our payment or have them not go up on a payment.
Yeah. And just lastly, I think one of the biggest factors that helped us pay off the debt was we increased our income, but we didn't increase our lifestyle.
Do you have any tips for increasing your income? Did you increase your income through like job promotion, or did you have a side hustle? What did you guys do?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that you can do is lower your expenses. But after you can't lower your expenses any further, the next best thing to do is to increase your income. And so, yes, we increased our income and we gave ourselves a huge shovel to wipe out this debt from our lives. And so one of the things that we did was we had to seek out promotions. We had to ask for raises at our jobs in order for us to increase our income. I do want to point out that RJ and I, when we first started paying down our debt, we were not making 6 figures. I wasn't making 6 figures at the time, and he wasn't making 6 figures initially. And so we had to actively seek out opportunities for us to increase our incomes. And so one of the things that helped us, to RJ's point earlier, he referenced a book called Never Eat Alone. And that book really helped us understand the power of networking. That's how we were able to get promotions at our jobs, where we learned how to network. We learned how to get in front of the right people. We did a lot of informational interviews, as we like to call them, where, if there was someone in a department that I was interested in, let's say a director, I would reach out to that director and say, hey, I'd love to learn more about your department. And if there's any opportunities, can I sit with you and just learn about your career journey? Just doing things like that and putting yourself out there just opened up opportunities. I was able to get a promotion at my job, and I had to ask for more money. They gave me the offer and I had to ask my hiring manager for more money. And to my surprise, the answer was yes.
Anjie, you mentioned that you have to change your mindset, because a lot of people who have that much debt will believe that they're just going to have to deal with it for the rest of their life. And you said also that neither of you guys were making 6 figures at the time. So what made you believe that you get rid of that debt?
Yeah, I think, again, the education piece is vital. The number one book for us in terms of understanding this was attainable to us was Millionaire Next Door. That a lot of times we think that millionaires look like the people that are driving the luxury cars, that have the luxury items, have the name brand Gucci or the designer brands. So once we were able to wrap our heads around what most millionaires actually look like, we were like, wait, that could be us. We were probably living in the midst of millionaires, like in our neighborhoods that we just didn't know about. I think that was eye-opening for us. And we were like, hey, let's try to be those millionaires next door.
So what's been your biggest mistake and what did you learn from it?
I'll start with this one. So for me, it was taking out private loans for school. Sally Mae approved me for a lot of loans, but the worst thing was the interest rate. My interest rate was as high as 9.5% for my student loan. And that by far was the worst mistake I made. Probably should have worked a little bit more, maybe full time or something. But I think that was by far the worst decision for me. And I think I just learned in terms at the time, I mean, I was 17, signed the first one, and then every year after that. So the biggest lesson was just more of like, read the paperwork, quantify how much in student loan or any loan that you're going to take out. What are the payments are going to look like? What's the interest rate? Is this a normal interest rate? Really educating myself and having discussions with multiple people about signing any documents, especially at that age. Now I'm more knowledgeable, but I think the lesson learned is just to share the knowledge with others who are about to take out a loan as well.
It's always been very interesting to me how you can get a student loans with a much higher interest rate than you can get a mortgage. So now that you guys are debt free, I read that you're focusing on becoming financially free. What does that mean to you?
What financial freedom means to us is really just time freedom and being able to just own our time and do the things that we want to do on our own terms.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times you want to continue making more money, climb the corporate ladder. I'm starting to learn through our careers is that the more promotions you get, the more raises you get, the higher titles you get, the less you have time for your family. So financial freedom is all about doing what you want when you want.
Yes. Good job, babe.
So now that you don't have to worry about paying off debt, how are you investing to become financially free?
Yes. So we keep it very simple in our household. We invest via index funds and consistently do that every paycheck. We have it automated where it goes an index fund, the S&P 500, every paycheck it goes into it and we don't look at it. We just allow it to grow slowly but surely.
For the listeners who might not be familiar with what index funds are or even the S&P 500, do you mind just sharing a little bit more?
Yes. So the S&P 500 is the top 500 companies in the US based off market cap. So basically that's outstanding shares times the market price of that stock. So Apple could be traded at a certain dollar amount, time that by the number of shares, and that's how you get the market cap. As far as an index fund will track index. Index fund would track the S&P 500, and the goal of the index fund is to be exactly what that benchmark is. So when the S&P 500, for example, is up, let's say 1%, that index fund should be 1% if it's tracking the S&P 500. So it allows you to diversify, allows you to essentially be the market without trying to beat the market. And it's really a passive form of investing that anyone can do.
Before we started recording, Anjie, you shared that you have recently left your corporate job to focus on Reach by Intention full time. And I'm curious to hear about your experience. One thing I noticed is that listeners are very interested in how they can earn more money through a side hustle. And you actually have made the transition from side hustle to now doing it full time. So if you can share a little bit about your experience.
I actually decided to leave my job back in the fall. It was like a twofold reason. The number one reason was to stay home with my little girl full time. And I think just being able to have this side hustle of Rich by Intention gave me the opportunity to really just be in the position where I could be home with her. Not only that, getting our financial lives together put us in the position where I could be home with her as well. And I think that's the value of just being able to manage your money with intention, paying off debt, figuring out a plan to pay down your debt, get on a track to start investing, really puts you in a position of power to live the life that you want to live on your terms. And so, so now I'm able to really dive into Rich by Intention full time. Well, I guess you can say part time because being a mom is a full time job. Being a parent is a full time job. So it's definitely about balance. And I'm still trying to figure out that balance. Our intention with Rich by Intention is to really make an impact on the financial lives of couples. We want to encourage couples to manage money together. And so through our podcast, through all of our resources that we have, we are really trying to help couples win with money together. So just being able to be in the position where we can really put our energy, our creativity into Rich by Intention. I'm just really excited about where we're headed, what's to come. There's so many great things that we have in the pipeline for couples. So
So for any of the dreamers listening right now, what are some of the steps that they can take today to start living a rich life by intention?
I would say the number one thing is to get educated about money. That's the first step that RJ and I took. Just reading the books, shifting your mindset about money, about paying off debt, about investing, I think is one of the most important things that you can do. And I think one of the things that I value about RJ is that he's a continuous learner. He's always looking to just feed himself knowledge. And that's rubbed off on me too, where I am a continuous learner. I'm always trying to find new knowledge about different things. And I think as goal-oriented people, you have to be willing to learn something if you don't know it. So there's so much information about personal finance that we're not taught when we're young. So now that we're adults, we kind of have to equip ourselves by ourselves. And so there's so many resources today, whether listening to a podcast like this, listening to our podcast, going on Instagram, following the personal finance creators. Today, more than ever, there's so many resources for you to get educated. And so I think that's the first step.
Yeah. The second step I would say is know your numbers. You have to budget. If you look at all the successful businesses in the world, they all have a budget. So you have to treat your money as one as well and know where your money's going so you can tell it where to go. Second, I would say is to lower your expenses where appropriate and negotiate as well. I think the worst that you always can hear is no, as we mentioned earlier, and it allowed us to save a lot of money. So look at your cell phone bill. If you've been with them for a decade or 5 years, they definitely can do some things to lower it. Next, I would say is
just to touch on the budgeting, because I think the budget allows you to, like RJ said, see where your money's going. One of the things that we learned when we did our budget was that we were spending close to $50 a week on lunch alone, which ended up being over $200 every single month on food alone. And so I think that's the power of the budget. You're able to know your numbers and you're able to see, okay, where can I really reduce? One of the things that we encourage our followers, our audience to do is we create a budget that gives you value, create a value-based budget, one that aligns with your true values. And so I think that's the power of doing the budget and just seeing this doesn't align with my goals. So I'm going to cut this out.
Yep. And just lastly, the increase your income, but not your lifestyle. If you're at a job right now, it's so important to build the relationships in there. A lot of times growing up, you may have been taught, keep your head down, work hard. But when your head's down, you can't see what's in front of you. So it's important that your boss knows who you are, your boss's boss know who you are, and you have a story and you learn their story as well. As I learned, it's all about the relationships. So you have to reach out, you have to take the initiative, get on LinkedIn, reach out to a couple of people who are in jobs that you may be wanting to pursue, reach out to hiring managers, recruiters, have those conversations and really just keep on taking those steps, connect with people, learn from them, and good things will start to happen. But a lot of times you could get so in your mind and not think that you're worthy of that promotion or that job opportunity, but you are. And the first step is really just to have the conversations, learn about the role, and then just take action.
Yeah, take your career into your own hands. That's what we did. It doesn't just come to you. You have to put yourself out there to get the opportunities that you want.
So, Anjie and RJ, I'd like to end the interview with a round of rapid fire questions. So tell me about a book that changed your perspective on life.
Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
What's one thing about money you wish you could tell your younger self?
You had more debt, so go ahead.
Go to community college or go to a state school ASAP.
What's the best investment in yourself you ever made or you've made so far?
Marion and Angie.
I was the best investment. Yes. Okay, I'll take it. I'm glad I'm not a liability to you, babe.
Assets over liabilities.
I would say that too. Can I say that too? I think that's actually a good point that you made, babe. Choosing who you marry is one of the most important decisions that you make. I think Warren Buffett said that. And so I would say, I think for each other, just finding someone who you can be on the same page with, who you can talk to about your goals and be aligned with the vision for your life is one of the most important investments that you can make.
Yeah. And for our married couples, we always say this, the slogan, invest in your marriage before you invest in the stock market.
Yes.
Filling the blank in 3 words or less. Money to me is
a tool.
What do you want your legacy to be, Angie?
I want my legacy to be, I really want just people to know that they are capable of creating the life that they want. And through our platform, it's my hope that we can really inspire people, especially people that don't realize it's attainable to them, that they have everything inside them to get control of their finances, to build wealth. And we didn't think that was possible for us. I come from an immigrant family. RJ grew up in the inner city. So I think it's just important for people to know that they have the power and the capabilities to do what they need to do to get themselves where they want to go.
RJ, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think for my daughter specifically, is one, for her not to go in student loan debt like I did or Anjie did. I want her to be able to pursue her dreams and goals without having financial roadblocks. And I want to pass off not just generational wealth to her and my future grandchildren, but I want to pass on generational knowledge to her as well. So the money continues to keep growing and continues down the line.
I'll say this too, because we have the same legacy. It's not just I have a legacy and he has his own legacy. Being a couple or being married, these are our intentions. We want to help people win with money, but we, like RJ said, we want to instill healthy money values in our children and in our grandchildren, and being able to pass down the knowledge that we've gained over the last decade into our family.
So, Anjie and RJ, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Can you tell our listeners where to find you?
Yes, so you can reach us on our website at richbyintention.com. You can listen to our podcast right where you're listening to this podcast now. Podcast is Rich by Intention. And you can follow us on Instagram for money tips and inspiration at Rich by Intention.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Dreamers. I hope you enjoyed Anjie and RJ. Coming up on the podcast, we have Mark Russell, the founder of Better Wallet, and we talk about how to build a six-figure side hustle. If you haven't caught up on last month's podcast episode, I suggest that you do just that. We have How to Build Wealth Through Real Estate with Erica Brown, as well as the anniversary episodes where I share my lessons learned after a year of podcasting, and so much more. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers podcast. You can find the episode show notes and all of the links mentioned at dreamoflegacy.com. If you liked today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate and review the podcast to help the podcast gain more visibility. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, please take a second to tag me at thedreamers.podcast on Instagram and let me know what you liked about today's episode. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers podcast.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.
Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. Jumino is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All Jumino products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves.